As an applied mathematician, you have a wonderful opportunity because you talk to people who need this stuff, who are highly motivated and very smart, but they just don't have the math sometimes. And if you can translate it to math, you've done a great service to them and yourself.
Welcome, friends. Today I sat down with Stanley Osher, a mathematician at UCLA. He has won many awards in his career, including the prestigious Gauss Prize. In the words of the award committee, this was for his influential contributions to several fields in applied mathematics and for his far-ranging inventions that have changed our conception of physical, perceptual, and mathematical concepts, giving us new tools to apprehend the world. On a personal note, I met Stan on a summer day almost 10 years ago. At the time, I was an undergrad and Stan surprisingly decided to entertain my cold email to meet and talk about applied math at UCLA. Long story short, Stan helped advise my graduate studies, we continue to collaborate on papers today, and I'm happy to call him my friend. The conversation that follows provides some highlights from his career. One thing that I wish to draw your attention to is that throughout, even now in his 80s, Stan is constantly learning. If you enjoy this conversation, I encourage you to subscribe at typoacademy.com, which has free and premium options. Both include email updates for each episode and articles that I write about optimization. A link is provided in the show notes. And now, let's dive in. So Stan, I have to start by asking about Brooklyn. I hear a lot of stories about this. So can you tell me about Brooklyn as a kid?
Brooklyn as a kid, I lived in part of Brooklyn, which was called East New York. If you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, have you seen?
I actually haven't seen it, but I know of it. It was before I was born.
It's about the mafia, and the guy who's the star, an anti-star, existed. His name was Henry Hill, and he was my neighbor, like a couple of months younger than me. And I pretended to say I knew him, but I really didn't actually. But anyway, it was a neighborhood. Everybody was Italian or Jewish. I don't think I saw a Protestant until I was like 19 or something. The very unusual background for mathematics. And how I got into it. I have an older sister who is got a PhD in math, and she was like one of the first women. So she let me know what a great life it was. We lived in the good old days when there was lots of money to be a graduate student because Sputnik had happened, and they were desperate, really, the U.S. was. So I was lucky enough to get a scholarship when I was 20, and it changed my life. I moved out of my house in that slum and had lived in a village right next to NYU, and those were great days, actually. New York University had the best applied math group there probably in history, actually, amazingly enough. Lax and Friedrichs and Fritz John and Nirenberg and Joe Keller and Herb Keller. And it was an incredible place, very inspirational.
Was it all like PDEs type stuff? When you say applied math back in the day, is that pretty much all it was?
It was either mathematical modeling.
Okay.
Numerical analysis was just starting. Computers were just being invented, would you believe? And that was part of it, numerical stuff. And it was PD, modeling, numerical stuff, asymptotic analysis. Asymptotic analysis was a big deal. I was never crazy about that. But anyway, that was the center of applied math. And UCLA was the center. NYU was the center of that kind of stuff. So I got involved in numerical analysis after I got my PhD because I ran into a problem which used some functional analysis, which I really loved. And that's what started me. So after that, the next 20 or 30 years, I don't know how many, I was basically doing numerical solutions of PDEs and analytic stuff about PDEs.
Is that where the E&O stuff came in?
Yeah, all that stuff. The biggest problem in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, was blow past an airplane because of shocks and stuff like that. And it's well known that you can't use, the schemes have to be nonlinear because there's a fear that if you have a linearly stable scheme, which is first order, I was saying, if you have a linearly stable scheme, like Kim would say, and it has to be first order to solve a problem like that. There's a theorem due to Goddard about first order schemes.
Interesting.
So we needed second order, and we couldn't do second order linear because the theorem states basically linearity implies first order. That's a very nice result. And it turns out that there was a very nice idea which you do it turned into Eno, where you do interpolation to choose the stencil that's going to be updated. And that's a very nonlinear decision. It's based on which one is smaller or bigger. There's an input statement in there. And that changed the world. And it was very, very dynamic, exciting. It lasted for about 5 or 10 years more. And we wound up winning. That Eno is what people use. Eno means weighted, essentially not oscillatory.
Got it.
Well, I got involved in a lot of stuff, and it was a lot of fun, and it got me all kinds of jobs and whatever, but it was basically solved, more or less. I mean, a lot of interesting stuff goes on afterwards, of course, but the basic stuff is hardwired into books and everything. So after that, I was working at Rockwell, as a consultant at Rockwell Science Center, and there was a guy there, Lenny Rudin, who you may recognize the name, Rudin Fatimi, who was this, how can I put it, interesting Russian guy who had danced to his own drum. And he asked me some questions about shocks and stuff like that. And I said, why are you interested in shocks? And he said, because images have discontinuities, and in order to resolve them, you have to avoid oscillations or smoothing. You have to do something nonlinear, and shocks seem reasonable. And at that point, my eyeballs turned into dollar signs, and I ran after him, and I finally cornered his thesis. And the son of a gun had a really good idea. There's a link between, I don't know if you read the TVD papers and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's been a while.
But there's a link between image processing and shock calculations because they both want to resolve discontinuities without oscillations and overshoot or smearing. And that changed the world. I mean, my TV minimization paper with Lenny and another guy, Fatimi, has just turned 20,000 citations.
I did want to ask about one story. I don't think I heard this when I was a grad student, but I think someone had referred it to me maybe. And that is that when I tell people about, like, you do math, like image processing type stuff, like they, talking to me, I say, oh, it's like in the Bourne movies where you like enhance the images.
Yeah.
But I found out later that there actually was a story from you at UCLA with this. It was like with Rodney King or something. Is that right?
Yeah, that's old news. A long time ago, I had a company with Lenny Rudin, the guy Rudin Osher Fatimi, who had the idea. I mean, I've been lucky to have terrific collaborators who steer me in the right direction. Lenny was he was really smart, but he was not a mathematician, so he didn't know much. He had the intuition that this is the right way to look at things, which was a great idea. And that the discontinuities in the image are really, really important, and you want to take care of them. And the best way to do it turns out to be total variation. Yeah, so at that point, we had a company, which was off campus. Lenny was full-time there. I was part-time. UCLA knew about it, so it was on the up and up. And we were, getting jobs to do. And it turned out during the Rodney King riots, the government came to us and wanted us to enhance videos to make sure that was really Rodney King who did what he did, and the other guys. And we did that. And a couple of things happened. One, we got a lot of very interesting phone calls at our office. I was looking over my shoulder whenever I went anyplace. And two, I made enough money for my divorce to get a new house and stuff like that. And, but it got to be too much. So that was a big success. We actually, in those days, now the competition is fierce and a lot of smart people working on it. But in those days, we were the only people doing that. So I published the TV paper for a couple of years because Lenny and I wanted to make money and keep it secret, and we did. But I'm not, Steve Jobs, although luckily I don't want to be, he's dead now. But I didn't get to be, I didn't get to be a billionaire because I don't know if I was the best businessman in the world, but it did give me an extra income, and it was a lot of fun, and I did a lot of real problems. In particular, medical imaging. So
What about that?
every time, I don't want to brag, but TV is built into MRIs. TV enhancement is part of MRI stuff and other stuff. It's well known. It's a tool everybody uses. And in the old days, so TV means you minimize the error A, minus the blurred image minus with noise image minus f squared, what you see, and you add something which regularizes it. In the old days, it was the Wiener filter. And if you read Wiener's paper carefully, it's very old, and you can't blame him. He minimized the L2 norm of the gradient to U squared.
Okay.
So it became Laplacian inverse or something. Laplacian, and that's wonderful, and that gets rid of some of the noise, but it blurs the hell out of everything. And it doesn't restore edges.
Right.
So all we did was change grad U squared to absolute value of grad U, and the world is ours. That was it. Very simple. So a lot of this stuff that I'm is lucky enough to find somebody who has worked on an interesting subject is doing it wrong. As an applied mathematician, you have a wonderful opportunity because you talk to people who need this stuff, who are highly motivated and very smart, but they just don't have the math sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can translate it to math, you've done a great service to them and yourself and learned a new subject. I mean, so I'm supposed to be an expert of photonics, for example. I had a company which another company was very successful, but I didn't make any money out of it at all. We changed the way we do construct, essentially etching, or whatever you want to call it. I forgot the buzzword, but this uses the level set method from beginning to end. But basically, you're trying to you essentially etch something. You're trying to get you're trying to get an image out of it, a shape out of it to a desired shape. So you have something in between which distorts the rays and sends them down on the ground, and then down on the stuff you're looking on, and then you try to get a given shape. So that turned out to be exactly the level set method, and that is the way we do that now. And that's been patented and everything. I didn't get anything out of the patent because it was a company that we weren't very good business people, and somebody took it over. But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
And are these like national labs that reach out and say like, "Hey, do you want to consult or something?" Or how do
these are profit making companies, but it's not my profit.
Yeah.
And but yes, national labs always use. I mean, I don't know about etching, but they certainly use Eno, Weno, and all stuff is used constantly to solve these. Level set method is used very often to solve geometry problems, and total variation is used to restore images and things like that, or restore. It's a very good thing to solve for a problem whose solution has jumps.
Right.
It is great. So once I got involved in that thing, it was optimization, drag, kicking, and screaming. I mean, we were minimizing something. And the only way I knew how to minimize something was by a gradient descent. And then I learned about a gradient descent where you project onto something and keep the low end. I forgot what it's called, projected gradient, which I thought I'd discovered, but it's been around for a long time. And that's what we did in that paper. But that led me into doing optimization because you wanted fast methods and all that kind of stuff, problems like that.
And you already knew about total variation because of the you mentioned.
Yeah, because all our work in shock calculations, there was parallel work on the analytic theory of conservation laws.
Okay.
And it became obvious that in one dimension, the appropriate norm is total variation.
Gotcha.
Because think about it, it jumps like this.
Right.
But if you square it, it's not a great thing. But the L1 norm is a good thing. And that if you look at an image, the L1 norm of that image makes sense. And BV norm of it also makes sense. You get a jump, And oscillations, which you don't want, have big BV, have big variation. So we got really lucky, and that was the way to do it. And it's still very popular. But that led me to an interest in optimization because we had to do something reasonable to solve it. after the dust settled. And in parallel, at a similar lucky break, although it was mixed blessings, I encountered James Sethian. I won't go any further than that. Anyway, but he was working on an interesting problem, namely moving surfaces. All right, so the level set method was basically, motion by curvature, things like that. And so I got interested in talking to him, and that also led me into, obviously, into optimization. I mean, you, again, get things you minimize in order to get what you want. Minimizing, for example, you can interpolate a surface by minimizing the surface area. The 2 points, by minimizing the surface area that goes through these points, stuff like that. And so little by little, I was led into optimization because of the applications I was working on. And then it became, totally fundamental everything I'm doing now, which is somewhat maddening because I had to learn probability when I was 60-something. So I got this far without, just doing Courant-style mathematics, old-fashioned Courant-style mathematics for a long time. And then everything changed. I mean, AI happened, and information theory and all that kind of stuff, Wasserstein distance, related to it, just became very important. And so I think I was lucky in that I could do, if I learned that stuff, I could use my PDE knowledge and numerical analysis experience to combine it with optimization. And that's what I've been doing for the past, God knows how many years, since 2012 or something, since I found out about AI. And even before that, what am I saying? All the stuff I did with BV and things related to it.
Sure.
Yeah. So I got into optimization through the back door. And like I said, I thought it was a trivial subject. Everything was gradient descent.
But then I think you've also done directly optimization work, like not just using PDEs, but like the Bregman type stuff. That's not at all PDE related, is it?
No, but how I did it as follows. I was working with very smart people, so I think I credit Martin Berger and Don Goldfarb, Wu Tao Yin, and I think, what's his name? My friend from Brown, Dalbon. We were doing something, and we wanted to improve minimizing until variation. And it turned out that by integration by parts, which is what I did, integration by parts. I mean, if you work in nonlinear analysis or you work in analysis altogether, I was taught essentially that there are two things that are necessary and sufficient, namely the Fourier transform and integration by parts. That when you're talking about nonlinear, that's about all you have is integration by parts. Duality, all that stuff comes from integration by parts. It's integration by parts, but in my world. So I realized that if you wanted to get improved accuracy in total variation minimization, if you looked at what you did after the first step and did something to it, basically adding back the error to it, you could show that improved the next iteration.
It's counterintuitive.
Very intuitive. I mean, if you look at the original problem, if we're minimizing total variation such that something is true. So take the Euler-Lagrange derivative of total variation, they call it pk. And the idea is you're solving pk is equal to lambda times some error term, and which is k, and just evolving. And it turns out that it's much better to write pk minus 1 is equal to that thing. And that's essentially Bregman iteration. So we wrote that first paper without knowing what Bregman iteration was. And the referee's report came saying, this is very nice and all that crap, but you're rediscovering something which is not only Bregman iteration, but it's very closely related to ADMM, alternating direction. Mm-hmm. In fact, it is ADMM under certain circumstances. So, but ADMM had not been applied to L1. And the moral of the story, it's not. Well, I know we got famous for doing it, so apparently it wasn't done. I mean, a lot of the work was done by these French guys. Lewinsky, who was a nice guy, just died last year, terrible. And he was doing L2 with ADMM. And the big deal is L1. You can show that it converges very quickly. And that's how Bregman got into TV minimization. And since then, there's been lots of great stuff happening with duality and so on. I mean, I just saw a paper by Goldstein, which is a year or two old, which has a really nice new way of doing minimizing TV. So these things never die. So that's how it all happened, and it keeps happening. I keep on running into people with good ideas. I feel like Dennis Rodman, he is.
Yeah, I know of him.
Dennis Rodman was a good rebounder. And somebody takes a shot, they miss it, I grab it and stuff it. And although he was more a defensive rebounder anyway. And, I'm less than 5'6", so I don't really do too many stuff too often.
Too many dunks.
But I find that talking to smart people is the best thing to do, which is what I'm doing right now, for example.
Oh, thank you.
And since then it's been great. I mean, I have a tendency to ride the crest of what's happening, luckily. So I really, to be honest, I had to reinvent myself to get into all this Wasserstein stuff and optical transport and what else? Things like that, which are very much, have a big optimization connection, but they also have a big probability connection and so on. So the reinvention is frustrating but fun. Very often I'm having conversations with people and they use language I don't understand. I nod my head and run back and I look it up to avoid looking dumb. That's often true in probabilities.
Yeah. So you said like there's like this like I don't know, like discovering these new things, but it also in some ways feels like with some of the machine learning stuff you're doing now, it's like going back to being able to solve PDEs again.
Oh, you're not kidding. I mean, the idea that you can use PDEs in this stuff is fantastic. And it's not that... It's a great thing for people like you. If you know PDE, which you do, it's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, when I found out about reverse diffusion by Song and those guys, it was mind-boggling. It really was amazing, even though it's a very simple idea. And I said, I got to work on this. They're doing something which is amazing. They're taking the heat operator and going backwards and getting generalization. So I'm working on that right now and trying to get rid of the optimization going backwards.
So I don't know if it's rid of it.
Well, I mean, I want to go backwards the right way, okay? And it turns out that if you solve the problems, well, forward, backward, what they are doing, there's two steps. One is, it looks like a backwards heat equation. Yeah, the other one is a little better behaved, and you go back and forth in time. And it's very, and so it turns out that that's equivalent to getting the Wasserstein proximal. We have a paper about that. So following the work we did with you on proximals, we then looked at the Wasserstein proximal where you minimize the integral of something, whatever, F something, plus the 1 over 2t, the Wasserstein distance squared between X and Y. And that turns out to be exactly equivalent to reversing the heat equation when you know the score function. It's amazing.
Have you found, being applied math with all the PDE stuff, like what sort of applications are there? So like you mentioned like the generative stuff, like fluid dynamics, was that another big one for you or?
Why, you youngsters? Fluid
dynamics, I don't remember. So.
Fluid, especially aerodynamics, was the center of applied math in the 60s. Well, they wanted to beat the Russians and have supersonic flow and missiles and all that crap. And it involved shock calculations. And of course, it's still very important. Fluid dynamics, everything is a PD. Come on. Every kind of anything that's not particles is continuous, turned out to be a PD. And usually a nonlinear PD. I like nonlinear PD with strong convection in them. Both the theory and the applications. I mean, it's a fantastic subject. And it allows you to get discontinuous solutions and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I still agree with what I learned 60-something years ago, that PD is it. But the applications of it are incredible. I don't really, I'm not a super PD analyst. I don't do things like Abedrosian and some of these really good guys who regularity and stuff like that. I assume everything works, and then try to get an algorithm. My idea is, write an algorithm that seems reasonable and let people use it. If they don't scream, then you got something. And later on, Craig Evans will prove it really works. That's how it applies now. And that led us to L1. It didn't lead us. I mean, Terry Tao and Manuel Candez and who else? What's his name? Tao Candez and third guy.
I don't remember the name off the top of my head either.
Man, me too. He's a friend of mine. What the hell? It doesn't matter. Anyway, what they did was realize that if you want sparsity is related to L1.
Right.
And that was known a long time ago, actually. There are papers in which people say that routinely. But these guys realized you could make a theorem out of it, and it was very precise. And so I got involved in that from the numerical end, because minimizing TV is almost like minimizing L1.
Mm-hmm.
Same philosophy. And Bregman iteration turned out to be great for that. And that's how I really got into optimization, working with, as I said, Wotow and Don Goldfarb and a few other people, Martin Berger.
Mm-hmm.
We minimized L1 using Bregman. At the time, that was the best way to solve it. Now there are other ways that are competitive, but it turned out to be a really good thing. So it's always been luck, finding people who are doing interesting things and think I can do this better.
And it sounds like people in totally different fields each time, almost.
Yeah, but I would say the important thing is thinking continuously rather than discretely. I mean,
can you elaborate on?
Yeah, in other words, I think continuous mathematics is the answer, and that's almost everything. Whenever I have, for example, if you look at, and you probably know about this. I mean, when an AI became popular, in the beginning, they were solving xk plus 1 is equal to f of xk minus 1,
mm-hmm.
f of xk or something like that. And then some genius came up with xk plus 1 minus xk is equal to this. And then some other genius realized this is a differential equation, for Christ's sake. And that changed everything. And that trivial thing, which was done about 7 or 8 years ago, made this guy a fortune. And he's a smart guy, did other things too. I forgot his name. But so I think transforming something which was not obviously a differential equation or approximation into that, you gain so much a priori inequalities and behavior.
I think it's much simpler, I think, from the analysis I've seen.
Of course, numerical analysis is much harder than PD because it's so stupidly discrete. You have extra terms to worry about. I mean, of course, that's a silly statement, but a given problem, when it's discretized, it's usually harder to deal with analytically than when it's continuized. Especially if you don't care whether everything's smooth or not, you just go ahead and do it. Hopefully, which is what for example, that's what we did in our Hamilton-Jacobi paper and the other paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we took non-smooth things and we used the theorem doesn't guarantee convergence, but it works.
Right. Yeah, so, interesting. I guess maybe the last thing I'd want to ask about is if there's any advice to the younger crowd that's trying to learn math or trying to find the value in studying math as opposed to something else.
I hate to say it, but learn statistics. You got to know that. And I'm like a man with one leg. I mean, I'm struggling with that. Learn statistics, learn probability, but in particular, learn differential equations and optimization. And a combination of that, I think, will cover almost everything you need in AI. And the differential equations, a lot of people will think it's orthogonal, but it's not. It comes up all the time because you really are solving xk plus 1 minus xk is equal to something. So it's good to think that way. And so I think that's what people should study, and then talk to people who do applications and find out what they need. And again, as an applied mathematician, it's great because you talk to people in a million different fields that is usually a common thread to many of their problems. And sometimes they have really good ideas, but they're totally unique to that one problem, not realizing how general it is. And it's, it's great. I want to get back to it right now, actually. It's really fun. Yeah.
Well, then on that note, I won't hold you any longer. I'll let you get back to the PD.